Nature in My Backyard, for those who don't know, is an initiative to promote native plants in yards and create havens for backyard biodiversity, aligned with so many other initiatives that have a kindred mission. One of the differences with Nature in My Backyard is we actually have teams of volunteer master gardeners who will make site visits to homeowners' yards and help get them to take the first steps on identifying invasive species and removing said invasive species and take those first steps towards creating some viable habitat for native biodiversity. So very exciting about everything that's happening in this sphere and sort of the rise of awareness of native plants and native biodiversity. And I think Nature in My Backyard is providing a pretty essential tool and a unique tool. So if you want more information about Nature in My Backyard, go to natureinmybackyard.clevelandaudubon.org. And I said that this is our monthly Zoom series. I just give a pitch out for our February speaker. On Wednesday, February 11th, we'll have none other than Judy Semrock, who probably many of you, no matter where you are in the state, know of. Judy is a well-known conservation specialist, extraordinary biologist, and educator extraordinary. And she is going to be giving a program called Ephemeral Excitement, the Spring Rush for Sunlight, Nectar, Pollen, and Love. Ooh, now doesn't that sound good? Okay. Particularly as we get close to Valentine's Day, how apropos. When you think about vernal pools and all of those spotted salamanders getting together in writhing balls of erotic delirium. Anyway, that's for next month. But today we are really, really stoked and excited to have none other than Hope Taft. And I think Hope is well known to everybody as a former First Lady of the state of Ohio, but she has a resume that just goes on for pages and pages and pages. And though we should go through every bullet point on that, I'm just going to read you parts of a press release that was put up at the Garden Club of Dayton that was announcing that the Garden Club of America, in announcing their 2026 national medalists, has recognized Hope Taft with the Achievement Medal, one of the highest medals that they possibly convey. And she'll be receiving this, I believe, in April. The medal will be presented to Hope Taft. I'm reading from the press release. An inspiring and steadfast advocate for the use of native plants in landscapes and the preservation of natural ecosystems. Simply put, Hope Taft is a force for nature. Always thinking ahead, the former First Lady of Ohio left an indelible fingerprint at the Ohio governor's residence by advocating for natural ecosystems, green energy, and horticulture. On the lookout for sustainable practices, she arranged for the installation of solar panels, which continue to serve as a backup for the security system. She established the Ohio Heritage Garden at the governor's residence, filled with 600 varieties of native plants, many of which are listed as being threatened or endangered. Her important work led to the establishment of Ohio as the nation's first state to designate April as Native Plant Month. And I think that Nancy Lintz, the leader of that effort, is also on this program today. Ohio's model was written to be replicated nationally and has helped lead to the recent adoption of Senate Resolution 157 designating April as National Native Plant Month. Hope has planned countless river float trips to introduce lawmakers to the importance of scenic waterways and clean water. She has traveled many times to Ecuador and Mali on behalf of the Tandana Foundation, founded by her daughter, where she teaches horticultural and gardening practices, trains native citizens to do the same, and shares food, culture, and fun. She campaigned tirelessly for UNESCO World Heritage Site designation for the Hopewell Ceremonial Earthworks, one of the only such sites in the United States and right here in Southern Ohio. Hope has 2 honorary doctorates, several Lifetime Achievement or Hall of Fame recognitions, and catch this, 89 state, local, or regional awards and recognitions. She is respected, appreciated, and described by her colleagues and peers as a passionate advocate, a dedicated educator, a thoughtful mentor, a persistent motivator, an inspirational speaker, a bold visionary, and a tireless volunteer in the worlds she moves in. I don't know what better introduction you could possibly give for someone, but we are so amazingly proud to be able to have Hope Taft here talking about a subject that really factors in for all of us, the ecoregions of Ohio and the factors that grow the plants that we find, the native plants that are here. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Hope.
Thank you for that kind introduction. What I have learned in the last 25 years is a lot about Ohio and its botanical history. When I entered the governor's residence, I knew I liked spring ephemerals, but not much else. I had planted them in every house we had lived in since leaving Arkansas as a teenager, and I wanted them in this new house too. What I learned about gardening can be summed up nicely as garden with nature. But what does that really mean? It means learning a lot about the main component of ability, soil, climate, and water. So let's explore each in Ohio. What I know, or at least think I know, I learned from Guy Denny, Gary Meisner, Dewey Hollister, and Jane Rogers, the co-creators of the Heritage Garden with me at the governor's residence, and Deborah Kanapke, a good friend, the Columbus Garden Sage, who you will hear from in March, and the Heritage Garden Manager for a while. And add Nancy Lentz to any list you want me to make of people who have been patient with me and taught me a lot. But I have a big disclaimer. I am no expert in anything gardening related. I was a marketing major in college, but I have learned a bit about nature that I would like to share with you. And to make it fun, I have highlighted a few aha moments that made concepts become much clearer to me. I learned some things are very particular about where they grow, the amount of water available, their exposure to light and shade, and soil type all play major roles in determining where they like to live. Each of these factors are, at least in part, related to geology. What's beneath your feet plays a large part in where rivers flow, groundwater is available, flat land or hills that face the sun or not, or if the soil will be acidic or alkaline, porous and sandy, or soggy clay. Because of this close relationship, I was behind the effort to put the geologic timeline and map at the state fairgrounds. I recently saw the Rachel Carson quote, "In nature, nothing exists alone. We are all tied together, and nature is stronger than we are, so we need to learn to at least let her lead." If we garden with nature, we make our lives easier because we are working with natural processes and not against them. The main component you need to think about are when gardening with nature are soil, water, and climate. It makes sense to me now, but it was a great aha moment when I finally put it all together. You might not think that botany and geology have much to do with each other, but they do. I had a big aha moment when I learned more about E. Lucy Braun's life work, whose degrees from UC were those in geology and botany. And then I went with Guy Denny of Davis Memorial and watched him point out each of the four physiographic regions we hiked through by knowing the plants we saw. Soil type is based on the geologic history of an area, and climate is what those zone maps are all about. And they predict the low average temperatures for that band of the country. And water availability depends on the first two. Next comes some slides that talk about what I learned developing the Heritage Garden. And I will share some of the other aha moments I had along the way. And let's spend a little time learning about Ohio geologic history, the heart of it all. And let's start our journey at the very beginning. I will run through these slides pretty quickly, but I wanted you to see the parts written in dark green because that talks about the various kinds of plant development in the different geologic times. The aha moment for me was realizing that plants were around for so long and started off as algae. Although geologic records start 4.6 billion years ago, there are no surface features of bedrock in Ohio before the Ordovician period. Earlier periods, like the Precambrian and Cambrian periods, are layers of sediment buried 20 to 30 miles beneath the Earth's surface. We can see examples of the Precambrian rocks called glacial erratics that the last glacier brought down from Canada over 14,000 years ago. That was an aha moment for me to realize that these granite rocks from Canada were part of the Canadian Shield and are the oldest visible rocks in the state. The Ordovician period is one of the periods that we are most familiar with in the Cincinnati-Dayton area. It's the pink area, and it lasted about 40 million years when the land we call Ohio was 35 degrees south of the equator, enjoying the area of the world now covered by the coral reefs of Australia. It was covered by water, and all that marine life eventually was compressed and became limestone and what we call the Cincinnati Arch. These fossil-rich layers tell the story of the ebb and flow of the waters covering land over thousands of years. The green area represents the Silurian period when warm water still covered what is now Ohio. This layer of limestone and dolomite is great for aggregates and salt for our roadways. In fact, salt hidden deep in the subsurface can be found under all or parts of 22 counties of northeast Ohio. Morton Salt has a big mining operation at Mentor that goes into out under Lake Erie that is miles deep. Brine wells are found in the eastern part of the state, and our state invertebrate fossil, the Isotellus trilobite, was alive and well and very plentiful during this period. An aha moment for me was evaporation must have happened over long periods of time because it is so deep. The Devonian period is the name given to the orange stripe of bedrock seen dividing the state almost in the middle. 400 million years ago, Ohio was still under a shallow sea, but it was moved within 10 degrees of the limestone made from its marine life is great for buildings and can be seen in the Ohio State House. This period is known for its shale, formed when there wasn't much oxygen in the water and the formations called concretions. Berea sandstone was also made from its sandy bottom and is famous for making grindstones. These different types of rock tell us that Ohio moved from being under clear water far from the shore to muddier water closer to the shore to sandy water near the shore. See the orange spot in the middle of the green? It is the highest place in Ohio. The Bell Fountain Outlier is called that and was made from Devonian bedrock. It is known as Campbell Hill, and it is 1,549 feet above sea level. An aha moment came when I was told shale had the ability to hold oil and was explored in that during World War II. Another aha moment is that I can now walk down the county walkway at the Heritage Garden and know what geologic time the bedrock examples there came from. And I can look at the ferns along the way and realize their kindreds have been around since 444 million years ago, and the conifers date back to almost that far. This map is a deep historical look at where we live now. Notice the Illinois and the Michigan and Appalachian basins and the Cincinnati Arch. Those patterns still exist in different sizes. What surprises people a lot is that the Appalachian Mountains that we know are about on their third or fourth rendition, having eroded, blown their sand elsewhere, and pushed up again. The mountains are believed to have formed about 480 million years ago during the Ordovician period. They are called Arcadian Mountains in this map. When the Arcadian Mountains pushed up, the Appalachian Basin appeared, and then the Cincinnati Arch, and then the Illinois Basin, etc., like the ripples on a pond. Aha moments for me, much of the sand in the west, like the Colorado Dunes and the Grand Canyon, are formed from these mountain ranges. And another aha is the Appalachian Mountains start way up in northern Quebec and run about 1,500 miles down the eastern side of the St. Lawrence Seaway in eastern United States. There's a wonderful garden at Grand Matisse in northern Quebec, very close to where the mountains start. This is a quick look. The Carboniferous period saw Ohio close to the equator and gave us the deposits of coal and oil that have been a big part of Ohio's economic development. The missing period is one of about 6 periods of great extinction on the Earth. The Carboniferous period was the beginning of Ohio's coal deposits, often divided into the Mississippian and Pennsylvanian periods. It's the blue area on the map. The land was swampy and close to sea level, warm and humid with lots of oxygen, perfect for growing large insects and trees and other plant materials that can be identified in the fossils of this period. This vegetation eventually died and sank into the swamps where it was cut off from oxygen and decayed. And it eventually became fossil fuel and the perfect conditions in eastern Ohio for today's oil and coal and, for yesterday's oil and coal and today's fracking. Our state gemstone, flint, was made during this Carboniferous period. At other times during this period, Ohio was well above sea level and the Appalachian Mountains were forming again. That is the only reason we can see this layer of bedrock on the surface of Ohio. The rivers flowing out of the mountains brought sand and gravel, clay, and other plants. And one of these rivers was the Taze Rivers. As its name suggests, this land had a missing period in its geologic history. It's not represented or colored on the map because there are no signs of it in the state. The land was above sea level all the time, and erosion removed all traces of the dinosaurs or rocks and other things that might leave a trace of their existence. It was a very long period, about 50 million years, so lots of creatures could have been here that we will never know about. From other places, we know this was a time of great explosion of plant diversity. The earth was dry enough to create plants which flowered, had insects to pollinate them, and had seeds that used wind to travel. This was the last of the periods of widespread erosion in the Earth's history, which saw major extinctions of plant and animal life. The ahas, for me, the Taze River system was one of the many ancient river systems that shaped Ohio, but it had its biggest impact on southern Ohio. And another aha, you can't tell if you have a male or a female ginkgo until the tree is about 30 years old. And the two can be very far apart, but still need each other to mate. The Heritage Garden has a female, and the only male I have been able to find is the one on Jeffrey property at the other end of the street. And another aha, the mining of flint was probably Ohio's first industry. Though mined and used by the Paleo Indians, its heyday was the Hopewell culture 2,000 years ago that really exploited its trade value, as small pieces of it can be found all over most of the continental United States. I also learned about Pangea, the last time when all continents we know today were combined into one. The aha moment for me was one of this realization that one reason why plants are similar to one another but have evolved differently is that they all started in the same place during Pangea, but ended up in different continents and developed different characteristics to ward off predators or adjust to climates. I call them cousins. The last ice age has the most to do with what Ohio looks like today. It forced the Taze River that flowed from North Carolina through Ohio and Indiana to the Mississippi headwaters to change form. Part was pushed south and became Lake Tight before it was added to the Ohio River, and part was buried underground throughout southern Ohio, but its traces of its riverbeds can still be seen. The movement of at least 4 glaciers flattened the terrain of western Ohio by pushing off tops of hills and filling in the valleys. It was successful in giving the land gently rolling hills everywhere in western Ohio except at Bell Fountain. Aha! Ah, Ta. This could be why we have valleys and not hills in most of the state. Have you ever noticed that the hills are the same height? That's because the land was a level plain before the melting ice and water cut through it, creating the valleys. Aha, glacial valleys were rounded with a flat bottom like a U, whereas river valleys have a more of a V shape. The last glacier advancing over the state had to stop at the Appalachian foothills in southeast Ohio. They were too tough for even the mile-high ice. Large rivers of melting ice formed uh, most of what we see around us. The wide valleys, the rivers, and the streams, the hills, the cames, the moraines, the fens, and the bogs of this area are all its landmarks. And another aha is since North America has mountain ranges that go north and south, plants could move as far south as they needed to avoid being frozen. While Europe's Alps run east and west, giving trees no place to escape. That is why the pioneers thought they had arrived in Eden. They had never seen some of the plants and trees they encountered on the North American shores and began almost immediately sending samples back to England. After this extremely cold period, when plants had to move south for survival, they slowly began to move north back into the barren territory. Some thought they had reached their home territory when they found the glacial lakes or deep ravines of Ohio and stayed here instead of continuing north. And white cedar and tamaracks are examples. The deciduous forest of the east made its first appearance to the state. As the temperature really warmed up, plants from the western prairie moved eastward into the state, forming the rich soil our farmers enjoy today in what is called a prairie peninsula. This warmer, drier weather allowed people to move in, and our prehistory and historical periods began. Before Europeans came, the temperatures dropped enough to allow trees and cooler weather plants to move in from the east and began to push the prairie plants out. It is thought that the Native Americans burned the prairies to keep them open for game and for agriculture. Aha! The short grass prairie plants were those that got less rain just east of the Rocky Mountains, and the tall grass prairie plants came from further east of the mountains, like Kansas, where they got more rain. The Hopewell culture was the first on the cusp of developing the agriculture system when it built the incredible ceremonial earthworks and traded Ohio flint over most of continental United States. By the time the pioneers arrived, the state had so many giant-sized trees. It is said a squirrel could climb on one near the Ohio River and not touch ground until it reached Lake Erie or Indiana. Here is the map of the pre-glacial Taze River winding its way through Ohio. The glacier pushed it south where it formed Lake Tite before it was forced to join in making the Ohio River. When it still flowed through the state, it brought many plants from the mountains of North Carolina with it. The big leaf and umbrella magnolia, the rhododendron, and the mountain laurel, to name a few. A big aha for me was the big leaf magnolia are only native to Lake Catherine in Jackson County nowadays, although these stately trees grew elsewhere and will grow elsewhere. You can find them in the Heritage Garden, for example. At one time, these plants covered most of southeastern United States. And another aha, the glaciers were so powerful they caused the southern tributaries that flowed north into the Taze River to change direction and flow south into the Ohio River. Examples are the Great Miami and the Little Miami Rivers. As a review, this simplified Ohio bedrock map tells us about its geologic history, a history of being underwater to above sea level, of moving from southwest on the edge of the globe to its current location, from long periods of erosion and extinction to rapid development of new species, from ice ages to extra hot periods. The world has seen it all and will probably see it all again if we take the long view. But an aha moment for me was the oldest bedrock in Ohio's surface is next to the Kentucky-Indiana border, while the youngest is next to the Pennsylvania-West Virginia borders. And it always seems backwards to me. If you want to learn more about the impact of Ohio's geology on Ohio's economic development and plant history, visit the Geologic Walk Through Time at the Ohio Department of Natural Resources area at the fairgrounds. Contact Chuck Salmons in the Geologic Division of ODNR for a special tour with a geologist. While you're taking a deep dive into geology, did you look at the plant development? More can be learned at the GeoWalk at the ODNR section of the fairgrounds. This is one of the charts found there. I have tried to note some of the changes on the previous slides, but this chart tells it in a more accurate and succinct way. This map helps us learn a bit about Ohio's soil. It shows how the various glaciers covered the state, as well as the rise and fall of the ancient Lake Warren that became known as Lake Erie after the glaciers retreated and Niagara Falls let the water out. The glaciers formed much of what is the state's topography. At one time in Ohio's geologic past, this land mass was above sea level, so lots of erosion took place intended to level the landscape. Then came the glaciers and continued to flatten the terrain by pushing sand, gravel, rocks, and soil into the valleys. This is often called the glacial till or glacial drift, and Ohio is full of it. As we learned from previous slides, it pushed so much till down that it changed the flow of rivers. This map helps you understand what impact the glaciers had on Ohio's soil composition because the glacial till often covered the bedrock. Ohio has been covered by at least two glaciers. The youngest is the Wisconsin glaciation period between 24,000 years ago and 14,000 years ago. The Illinoisan or the Gold period area on the map entered Ohio about 300,000 years ago and withdrew about 130,000 years ago. Some early glaciers stretched all the way down to where the Ohio River is in the Cincinnati area nowadays. Maybe as many as 11 glacial events were before the Illinoisan glacial period, but I do not know for sure. This map teaches us about Ohio when the white man came. It is the distribution of vegetation in the state at the time of the European settlement. And can you see how its patterns are similar to the glacial map and the bedrock map? It is currently being redone based on the initial survey work done first in the Northwest Territory. Thomas Hutchins, who lived 1730 to 1789, was the geographer of the United States and was the first surveyor to implement the public land survey system of the Federal Land Ordinance of 1785. This survey established clear land divisions, allowing for orderly settlement of the and preventing disputes over land and its ownership, and was thus facilitated the expansion of the United States. He started the process at the intersection of Ohio, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia, very close to the mouth of the Little Beaver Creek as it empties into the Ohio River, and close to East Liverpool. It was the first public land survey in the world. Aha moments? This survey work divided the land into 6 square mile townships, each of which are divided into 1 square mile lots. Townships predate Ohio's statehood. At Rufus Putnam's suggestion, the area was called townships. Putnam was one of the founders of Marietta, Ohio, and an ancestor of Nancy Hollister, Ohio's first female governor. The system eventually covered 3/4 of the continental United States. So we can thank being in Ohio for this system. Besides bedrock and glaciers and the type of soil they produce, temperature is very important for plants and is another way and another of the things that make up physiographic regions. You can better understand the difference 15 to 18 years have made in Ohio's plant hardiness if you see the maps side by side. Almost gone are the coldest blue areas, and the green areas are getting lighter color. The lighter the green, the hotter the temperature ranges. With the climate getting warmer, these maps will change again in the future to express the warming trends. More of Ohio will become light green or yellow. By 2050, Ohio summers are predicted to be like Arkansas and winters like North Carolina, both well in the yellow zones. Plants and animals have already adjusted and are adjusting and are trying to find their preferred locations. You can learn more about Ohio's resilient places from the Ohio Nature Conservancy's Bill Stanley. The aha moment for me was weather indicates we are getting warmer. It took me a long time to find the speck of blue near Mount Vernon, and a longer time to realize that Ohio has a new region and a southern tip, and some of the previous areas of warmer climates are commonplace now along Lake Erie. You can see what our future looks like. Our climate will get hotter. We better love those prairie plants and plants from the interior low plateau. If you go to the USDA plant hardiness zone map, you can add your zip code and see what its weather range is like. And that zone map is found at usda.gov/science/plant-hardiness-zone-map/. When you combine the underlying bedrock with the glacial formations, you get the reasons why various vegetative types populate different parts of the state, and plants respond to the climate and water they receive, as well as the soil they are rooted in. The physiographic regions are a combination of these three maps. Aha, the maps are so similar in so many ways. And another aha is I didn't even know the word physiographic became before I started the Heritage Garden. You can see Ohio's ecoregions are just part of larger regions, but it helps you understand why so many of our Ohio native plants are threatened or endangered, since they are on the edge of the regions and not near the centers. And an aha moment, Ohio is a crossroads of ecoregions and plants and transportation and people. It also helps us realize that Ohio genotypes of native plants are the best for its land. They are adjusted to living on the edge. For example, Tennessee dogwoods are often sold in Ohio, but that is a long way from Ohio as far as but that is a long way from Ohio as far as geographic regions are concerned. Do you believe Ohio is the crossroads? Well, just look at this map and see how we are the crossroads of physiographic regions and highways. Then think of the walking trails of Native Americans and early explorers and troops, and our many waterways and canals and plains and other forms of transportation that have brought plants and people to Ohio. Stop at one of the new rest stops along our highways and see how they are now promoting native plants. The resulting map of Ohio is divided into physiographic regions which stretch far beyond our borders as seen in the previous map. For example, the Central Highlands till plains stretch halfway to the Rockies and cover the traditional tall grass prairie area that starts beyond the rain shadow of the mountains, and the interior low plateau, which encompasses much of present-day Kentucky and Tennessee. These areas of Ohio are part of a much larger area still. You can see three areas coming together in Ohio. The light green area is the Central Lowlands Till Plains, or number 6. The darker green area is the Appalachian Plateau, number 2. And the coral is the Interior Low Plateau, number 11. It's interesting to me to see that the Till Plains and the Appalachian Plateau meet in Ohio just about where the Devonian Columbus limestone orange streak runs up the state. It's about where the last glacier stopped too. This is about where the general soil types change from alkaline limestone to more acid sandstone. I-71 is the general boundary of the two regions. I don't know this for sure, but even if all the glaciers melt and the sea rises in the distant future, Ohio probably still will be on dry land. The reddish-brown area, number 7, might not be so lucky. They are known as the coastal plains for a reason. I learned all of this in creating the Heritage Garden at the governor's residence. It is one of a kind as far as governor's residents in the United States are concerned. It is Ohio's official botanical garden of native plants and is based on its 5 major physiographic regions. Visitors often ask what was from their part of the state, and we did a lot on the inside of the residence with glass and pottery and other furnishings. When nothing was in bloom in the yard in the fall, when it was cool enough to entertain outside, I asked for help. Dewey Hollister from Cincinnati came to the rescue and told me I needed native plants because they bloom from early spring to late fall. And then came Gary Meisner, the landscape architect, who knew of plants and was also from Cincinnati. And then Guy Denny joined the team, who was retired from ODNR and knew all about the special places in the state and took me to see them. And Jane Rogers from the Garden Club of Akron joined the group, and others who gave me ideas and helped to bring many ideas that they had to fruition. Gary says in the Heritage Garden, you can take the back roads of Ohio in 40 minutes, but I will give you a shorter trip around the state in the following slides. And my aha moment was native plants really do have a longer blooming season than non-natives and bloom from early spring to late fall. Let's start a quick tour of the Heritage Garden at the southern border of the state. The interior low plateau or bluegrass region is represented in the Heritage Garden with these plants. As you can see from the maps, the region barely crosses into Ohio, but as Ohio's temperature warms, they should become more prevalent. The crossvine is pictured here. It blooms very early in the spring on warm limestone cliffs and walls. See its pronounced color changes to attract its favorite pollinators and lead them to its sweet spot like a runway. It likes hummingbirds as pollinators, but if they are not arrived yet, they will lure any flying insect. The crossvine in the Heritage Garden was sourced from property owned by Nathaniel Massey, a frontier surveyor and early Ohio political leader. The passion flower looks like tropical, very tropical, but is already hardy as far north as Columbus. Its flowers last just a day and are pollinated by native bees and quickly develop the characteristic maypop seed pod. As climate warms, we will see more of these plants adopt further north in the state. The Heritage Garden has native cane and other plants that represent this area too. An aha moment is the average visitor cares more about the cultural history or stories about a plant than it cares about the botanical characteristics. Aha, the average visitor cares more about the cultural history or stories about a plant than they care about its botanical characteristics. Let's move around the state in a clockwise direction. Next comes the central lowlands till plains. This green space is what is called the Prairie Peninsula. In the Heritage Garden, it represents the prairie forbs and grasses that originated across the plains. Both short and long-stemmed varieties are represented. They like hot, dry weather, so we will be seeing more of them in the future. The compass plant helped pioneers tell direction because its leaves align themselves in a north-south fashion to avoid the sun's heat as much as possible. The underside of its leaf is cooler than its top. The Sullivan milkweed was found in the Darby Plains just west of Columbus by William Sullivan, son of Lewis Sullivan, founder of Franklintown, the forerunner of our capital city. The wife of Malcolm Jeffrey, who built the governor's residence, was a Sullivan. Rundell was another early botanist who discovered unnamed plants in the Darby Plains. This one was named after him because he gave it to a friend to record. You were not supposed to name plants after yourself at this time, but now they are removing all people's names from plants and giving them new ones. Echinacea is one of the native plants that is popular in the nursery trade today. Many nativars have been developed from the original native since man just can't seem to leave nature alone. We always think we can improve it, but usually end up messing things up. Be careful if you buy nativars to make sure that the traits pollinators like best have not been eliminated in man's efforts to please himself. The New England aster and the Olentangy aster are late bloomers that pollinators need to enable them to survive winters. There are so many beautiful native prairie grasses. I wish more people would use them like this one in their and other native varieties. And an aha moment for me was leaving the stems up all winter of these forbs and grasses help provide homes for some pollinators. The Huron-Erie Lake Plain areas at the top of the Ohio give the state its northern coast. And it also gives at least 3 kinds of major environments, plus several other ones represented in the Ohio Heritage Garden, like the Sedge Meadow. The Great Black Swamp, the last part of Ohio to be developed, is also close to the lake. The Oak Openings is made up of acid sand brought down by the pre-glacial Lake Warren. No, excuse me, not down by, but to. The Oak Openings was made up of acid sand brought down to pre-glacial Lake Warren by the ancient Detroit River. When Lake Warren shrunk into Lake Erie, the glaciers left behind the sand that was blown into dunes, which now support the largest number of listed plants in the state. 2 plants that are standouts that live there are the prickly pear cactus, yes, it's native to Ohio, and the butterfly weed that lives up to its name. Alvar in Ohio is basically slabs of Columbus limestone that have been exposed to the elements since the glacier left the state 14,000 years ago. Its plants are very hardy. One is the lakeside daisy, one of Ohio's federally listed endangered species. There is a USDA effort now to transplant some from Marblehead to Kelly's Island, and the best glacial grooves in the state can be seen on Kelly's Island. The aha for me was the lakeside daisy is a self-incompatible species, which means viable seed will not be produced if a plant is pollinated by a genetically similar individual. Lakeside daisies only grow on Alvar in Ohio, Illinois, Michigan, and southern Ontario. The headland sand dune is made up of sand and plants more familiar to people in Maine. This alkaline sand and plants traveled down the St. Lawrence Seaway when the heavy glaciers lowered the bedrock. Silverweed is one of the great ground covers that grow in this region, and the clammy weed is pretty, but it is a bit hard to grow if not on its dune, whereas silverweed will grow most anywhere. The aha moment came when you can really see the difference in soil types when you walk between the dunes in the Heritage Garden and then see the alvar that comes from a quarry at Marblehead with its fossils and glacial grooves intact. Around the northeast area of the state, you will find the tip of the Appalachian Plateaus, part of which was glaciated and the southern majority part, which was never covered by a glacier. The glaciated part saw at least one glacier move over it and thus gave it rolling hills that made the first good farmland the settlers found. They often used the ironwood tree that grew there and was one of the first deciduous trees to populate the state after the glaciers left, because, as its name suggests, it was very strong. This was true until Lewis and Clark brought the Osage orange tree east of the Mississippi, and being even tougher, it soon became the fence post of choice. This area also saw an influx of plants from the ancient Pittsburgh River. The unglaciated part is what we now call Appalachia and remains the very hilly, deep gullied, rugged terrain we see today. The aha, it's very easy to see the difference between glaciated created valleys and river created ones in this part of the state. Some of the Latin names give you a hint of where these plants came from. The bayberry is still used to scent candles, and the striped maple, sometimes called the striped bark maple or the moose maple, is also found in this region. It's easy to see why it got the name striped bark maple, but the early pioneers must have seen moose preferring their leaves and twigs too. Spikenard is a great local plant whose big clusters of red berries in the fall are a delight to see. Bogs were created when big pieces of ice dropped from the retreating glacier and made a deep hole called a kettle lake in the soft soil. Then plants who thought they were in Canada settled in. The decaying plants made the soil and cold water acid and the perfect homes for cranberries, high bush blueberries, grass pink orchids, pitcher plants, tamaracks, and the like. Aha! Do not use city or treated water on a bog. The chemicals in the water will kill the plants. We've learned that from experience. And water a man-made bog from the bottom only with rainwater. Another aha. Cranberries got their name because early New England settlers saw lots of cranes eating what they thought were the plant's berries. So they called it craneberry. The birds were really looking for things in the water. Eventually, the craneberry name was shortened to cranberry. But if you look at the flower, it does remind you of a long-beaked bird. In Appalachia, we find some outstanding plants that should be in every garden. Sassafras is one with its 5-leafed shapes. The big leaf magnolia came to the state on the Taze River, and the white hyacinth is an early bloomer. White false indigo, also a long-lasting spring bloomer, likes dry, hot conditions. Hearts are bursting with love come on strong in the fall, with its orange berries bursting out of a harder, darker shell. If you don't know these beauties, you should get to know them. They will grow most anywhere and will brighten your spring or summer. Hepaticas got their name in the 16th century when the signature of flowers effort was popular in Europe. The leaf reminded people of their livers. This large flower, trillium, is Ohio's native wildflower, an effort led by Anne Malmquist of the Northeast Wildflower Society in 1986. The petals, the sepals, the flowers of the trillium are all in threes. It is found in all 88 counties. Large stands of blooming large-flowered trilliums are breathtaking. However, white-tailed deer also like them and gobble trilliums like candy. The flowers turn pink with age. As with other trilliums, ants are major seed dispersers. Some of my favorite plants for wetland areas and ponds are these. Blue pickleweed will light up a pond. American lotus has a wonderful white flower and a great history, as it was one of the plants that scientists looked at that gave them the idea of how to make water-repellent material. Water beads up when it encounters lotus leaves. Native milkweed comes in varieties prepared to like any situation and helps our pollinators immensely. There is no need to use the Mexican variety. Ohio has two hardy varieties of water lilies, the fragrant and non-fragrant types. These water lilies are white and should be used more often. These are some of my favorite plants that could be used more. The cup plant can get away from you, but its story is worth sharing. Its leaves form cups with the stem that hold water to keep ants from climbing up the stems to pollinate the yellow flowers. The partridge pea is one of the few native annuals. Joe Pye weed can be found for many occasions or many occasions and conditions, and pollinators love them. Flowering spurge is a great filler. If you work in developing garden sites, you should know about this effort. It goes along with the LEEDS construction. A site can be sustainable over the long term only if it addresses competing demands on three fronts. It has to be economically feasible and includes having profitable, competitive, and enduring spaces to live and work and visit. Socially, this means shaping a community that allows us to live healthy, safe, and productive lives. And third, environmentally, this ensures that the global ecosystem that can continue to provide the basic ecosystem services that all life relies on. Like buildings, built landscapes can conserve resources or degrade and waste them. However, landscapes are unique in that they also have the additional capacity to enhance and regenerate natural resources, regardless of whether the site is urban or rural. Because a sustainable site can provide these ecosystem services, it can improve environmental quality rather than simply minimizing the damage to natural systems. The opportunity to realize or even quantify human benefits from ecosystem services represents a paradigm shift in the way society relates to environment. It is based on the premise that human beings are a part of, rather than apart from, the rest of nature. Humans are fully dependent on the services that natural systems provide and have a role in participating in and protecting the ecological systems which provide those services. CITES, SITES, suggests that conservation principles move ultimately to be productive, and to regenerate outcomes through high performance landscapes. Uh, how well we do that for the short term and the long term will create environments our great grandchildren will be living with. If we can do it right and work with sustainable development, it won't matter what the landscapes look like. Plants and animals and people will be able to live and enjoy the world and benefit from your efforts. One day I met State Representative Scott Wiggum and his wife, Catherine, a new member of the Garden Club of Akron, and daughter of Ken Cochran of Secrets Arboretum, a good friend who helped me create the Heritage Garden in its early days. And I then met the CEO of the Ohio Environmental Council, who introduced me to Nathan Johnson, their environmental lawyer, who you heard talk several months ago, and Nancy Lentz through my contacts with various garden clubs. Representative Wiggum introduced the bill in the Ohio House. I got Senator Bob Hackett, my state senator, to sponsor a bill in the Ohio Senate. This picture shows Governor DeWine signing a bill into law. Nancy really took the lead and worked hard to get the bill passed that made Ohio the first state in the nation to have a month dedicated to its native plants. She also started the nonprofit Ohio Native Plant Month and used my contacts to get the U.S. Senate to pass the first yearly resolution making April National Native Plant Month. She still does that yearly. Aha! Connections are important. So go to your local candidates night. Elected officials usually advance up the electoral ladder. Be nice to all, because today's adversary might be tomorrow's advocate. Aha, a yearly month gives you all a reminder that we need to emphasize the value of native plants and local environments at least once a year to people who don't normally hear the message. Come visit the Heritage Garden to learn more and get more ideas of what plants like in what conditions. There might be a list that Deborah Kanapke and I worked on in the new OhioNativePlant.org website. Deborah will be speaking with you all in March 2026, so sign up and learn more about using natives in residential settings. And I suspect you will learn more about the Heritage Garden and see pictures from it on her presentation. There are always ways to learn more and more ways to share what you have learned. The environment needs your voice, so speak up. Here's another one of my favorite quotes. What we do to impact nature comes back to impact us. So thanks for doing what you can do to increase the use of native plants and save our lakes and rivers and streams and open space so water can reabsorb into the aquifer and ground and nurture all nature. Because nature is free, it is often taken for granted and abused. It needs you to speak up for it. Contact the Ohio Native Plant Month to learn more. Plan your activity for April now. How will you tell others about the importance of native plants to the web of life and that nature is important to all of us for the survival of humanity? Please continue to amplify what you are doing now and speak up for nature. Be fearless.
Thank you for a really interesting program. And I am fascinated. Just one or two real quick questions, and that is, when you set out to with this adventure with the governor's residence, did you always have in mind from the outset that you were going to do representatives of all of the physiographic regions, or did it start with the commitment to do native, and then it grew into, hey, this could be a major interpretive experience?
It was started as a way to get the yard looking like something I wanted to entertain in the fall.
Well, that's perfect.
That's pretty, yeah. And it evolved into the native, representing the native plants because I met Dewey Hollister, who is a wizard of plant knowledge, and Guy Denny and Gary Meisner, and they helped me develop a system that we could educate people about Ohio outside as well as inside. And it has turned out that way. Um, Frances Strickland and other first ladies have told me that uh, foreign visitors or people who want to come to put industry in the state will come to the governor's residence and spend 5 minutes inside, but will want to go outside and see what Ohio really looks like and what it has to offer. And it's a great educational tool that I wish more people would come and visit.
And what a great legacy on your part. I mean, what a great gift to the state of Ohio and its citizenry. And I really, really salute you. I mean, you have done so many amazing things, and you are just a great champion. And know that yesterday when we were chatting in the afternoon, you made the statement that, we have to be a flagpole for the environment, and we have to speak up and speak out, and we have to honor what we have inherited. And boy, those are great words to go by. So, again, thank you so much for being with us this month. A reminder to everyone that next month we'll have Judy Semrock here, and we thank you all for participating in Nature in My Backyard in this edition of Brown Bagging It from My Backyard. Thank you all.
Thank you.